Well, hello. Well, hello. Well, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hey guys, welcome to the Pencil to Pencil podcast. We're back again. Tell a friend. We're going to win. I am your rhyming mathematician, Jamar Nicholas, man of letters, and your friendly neighborhood cartoonist.
You even have letters on your shirt.
Yeah, yo. This is my Yo MTV rap shirt. And it does.
Wow.
It blends real well with our branding.
Was that from when it was actually on?
No, I got this from Target.
Does it have like holes in the back? Like the back's all torn out now?
Got bullet holes in it.
Yeah.
I'm joined as always by my best bud and co-host, Mike Manley. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. And hello to all of you in YouTube land.
Yeah, what up, YouTubers? Last week, but we do these like every 3 minutes, Mike. So last Saturday, we had Rico Renzi on, a fantastic colorist, and he was kind of our guinea pig because last Saturday was our first iteration on going live on YouTube, and already, Mike, our subscriber count is going up. It's really exciting.
Right. So tonight, if you have not yet done it, go to YouTube and sign up. Become a subscriber on YouTube. And if you do that, there will be treasure. Some of you will end up having treasure. I'm not saying what the treasure will.
I don't know. Mike kirked out. I'm going to dump him. So I'm excited. I don't even know what he's talking about here, but he said there's going to be treasure. Hey, it's live, you guys. Let's see if he comes back on. No, all right. Well, I'm pro enough that I can keep moving on this. So what Mike was saying is that we're probably going to give out some prizes for our early YouTube subscribers. Oh, Mike, you're back.
Well, you know, Comcast is like, oh, you got to pay the bill. You didn't pay that. Got the plug. The guy's out of the line outside. He's got the plug.
I remember a comedian said, "How come the electric company can't just start dimming your lights rather than just turn them all off? Like the more your bill is due, the less."
8:05. So I'm imagining it's some sort of peak usage hour. So the internet is suddenly everybody's turned on YouPorn or something. So something, because it does it every week. Right around 8:05, 8:06, my internet goes blip.
So, well, maybe we should address that. Maybe we should bump our time up or down just to see if we can get around that. But technical issues aside, welcome, guys. Welcome back to Pencil to Pencil. This has been a really fantastic experience for myself and my co-hosts. We've been going live every Wednesday and Saturday night since April, Mike, and we have a lot
since the lockdown.
And Pencil to Pencil didn't start there. We were doing audio versions of
starting
the podcast
last year.
Yeah, starting last year. But this has really kind of given us the impetus to broadcast more and get the brand out there, keep the brand strong, you know. So with that, as always, we are sponsored by Clip Studio Paint. And I think we've kept our guest in the green room long enough. He needs sunshine.
He might have fallen asleep by now.
He needs sunshine and water like a growing plant. So I'm really excited to bring in our good friend and old buddy, THOM ZAHLER. A lot of you may know about his work and are probably fans of his work. Tom has been in the business for a while now. I think we're all like crossing the 20-year threshold, Mike, for us young guys.
You youngins, you gray-haired youngins. Yes.
So Tom may be famous for a couple of different things. He's got a lot of different audiences in different pools, which I find fascinating. His comic Love and Capes, his webtoons like Cupid's Arrows, Long Distance, He's written for My Little Pony. He's written for television. He's a Renaissance man, and I'm glad that I can call him a friend. So let's bring him on in. America's THOM ZAHLER.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hello.
Good.
How's your tech, Tom? You good over there?
Yeah, I'm good. As long as you can hear me, I'm good.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? No?
Yes.
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay.
So yeah, Tom, how is I'll just jump right into it. How's your business right now? Like, with all the stay-at-home stuff, have things changed for you as a full-time cartoonist?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It there's a degree that always feels like I'm putting out one fire or another. Working from home, there's no difference since lockdown. Like what it is when I'm at my house is identical to what it was before things changed.
Mm-hmm.
But all the conventions have gone away. So I'm not traveling, which is super weird. It lets you do things like cook, which I haven't really been able to do before. Because when you're home for more than 3 days in a row, then you can start buying food differently.
Yeah.
Losing convention sales has not been good. I'm still working on Webtoon stuff, so that is regular, and that's keeping me afloat. Like I'm not doing horribly, but I haven't felt comfortable since March. And like when you look out and every time you see another convention go away or close for the year and come back next year, your range of when it feels like things won't get back to normal goes on. Like I worry about
further,
IDW stopped publishing floppies for a while. I mean, most of the publishers did, but that suspended publication and some projects I was working on. So, like nothing. I can deal with whatever. I can play whatever game shows up, but the rules keep changing, and that makes it really hard.
Yeah. I know that all of us everybody's being affected in different ways, but I think I didn't really start realizing how bad it was when I forgot to clear my calendar in May. And I started getting all these alerts for things that I was supposed to be at that weren't happening anymore. And I started feeling really bad.
Why are you not at TulsaCon? Why are you not at?
Right. Yeah. The phone's trying to give me driving directions to
That's right.
Cincinnati. Right. Like I'm not going anywhere.
Return to the route. Return to the route.
I'm trying to return to the route.
Yeah, I think we're really in uncharted territory from the standpoint that since it's not like, oh, there's a storm coming, the storm will be here, the storm will go away. Like if you lived in Florida or you lived in a place that had a hurricane or a blizzard, that there's a certain amount of time, finite amount of time, even if your trees are torn down or whatever, the power company goes 10 days, 3 days, whatever. But with this, it's constantly, it's like a gutter ball that just keeps going from side to side. So,
there's nothing about this that feels comfortable or that you can plan for. Like,
but I think you're fortunate that you're doing web stuff and print stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always based a lot of my career on the guy from the Ed Sullivan Show with the plates. Like, I don't want to have all my eggs in anyone else's basket. I want to make sure if one thing goes down, like conventions, that I still have income coming in. I don't trust anyone that much. And I remember when I went freelance, I was talking with my aunt who was a teacher, and she said she didn't think she'd be able to deal with not knowing where her next paycheck was coming from. And I said, well, you don't know where your next paycheck's coming from. I just know what my boss is doing about it.
Right.
So I like that, but it's still kind of white knuckly these days.
Yeah. Have you put on your work gloves and had to do some stuff that you haven't done in a long time because I guess it just needs to get done? Maybe I should go put on this visor and walk down the street and see if I can
hand out my comics.
Yeah, get my wheelbarrow.
Yeah, I wonder about some of those skills. I've actually printed comic books for the first time in ever. Because I went web and IDW publishes Love and Capes, but I came back to Love and Capes and that's now coming out. The trade's coming out in September. And the thing is that, like, I had 2 issues that what idea we did on this one was they let me print the individual issues, and then they were going to collect the trade. They decided that they didn't want to do the individuals, and that's fine. But conventions went away, and I was just selling, a real limited number there. So I put together a thing for comic shops where even during the pandemic, I found a way to get comics out, because there's a printer I work with here in town that during the heyday of all the lockdown stuff was considered essential, because so many businesses, so many restaurants all of a sudden needed disposable menus in a way that they hadn't before, that they had to stay open.
Oh, right. Yeah.
For hospitals and buildings. So they were able to print the comics, and because they're digital, I could customize them per comic shop. So I could get them with their logo on it. And I had like 6 or 7 shops take me up on it. And one, I thought it was important just to, there's a line in Star Trek 4 that I keep thinking of when the planet's being covered by clouds and the Admiral says, "Sir, we can't survive without the sun." Like the way comics are, we can't survive without the shops. So I want to do what I can to keep them running. And then also it allowed me to print a certain number of books so that I could sell them directly. And it got me, I don't want to say it was political, but I wanted to make sure that comic shops had an opportunity to get my book before I put the digital or the print ones online, so that they had first bite at the apple. And then after that, it's that thing that DC and Marvel got into when they were worried about putting digital versions up, and the comic shops were like, but if you do that, we can't sell them. And how do we make this work? And like knowing and taking care of the people who are taking care of you is very important to getting through something like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of these questions are still wide open as far as, I think going forward, digital comics going to be a bigger part of direct market, or what was direct. I think a lot of people are going to be using digital, delivering digital, promotions digital, but also some people like to read it, but they want to have it, right?
I've had a feeling that print comics are kind of going to become like DVD box sets, where there are books I own digitally because I just wanted to read them, like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. But I need to have my copy of New Frontier. That I need to have physical. But like not every comic that comes out is something that needs to take up space in my house, because there's a point where I realized my house isn't getting bigger. So I started getting really picky about the stuff that came into it. And I could see some hybrid of that, the same way with, people still buy DVDs and Blu-rays, but they don't buy everything, and they don't need everything. They want to consume a lot, and they want to own a little bit, but those things can be a little more premium when you decide to do them like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, maybe you want to read 20 issues of Spider-Man, but you don't have room for 20 issues of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But you'll say, okay, every year I'm going to buy a certain amount of trades because I want to have the physical. And I think the younger you are, the more likely that probably is, because so many young people are used to reading stuff online, and they don't have that I need to put it in a bag thing.
Yeah, and I think some of that will burn out a little bit as they go, because if you go straight streaming, because I know people who did that, there's that point where your TV show disappears because suddenly the license rights have changed. Like, and now Friends isn't on Netflix. What do I do? So once you go through that, I'm very conscious of, like, as far as DVD sets, I have the Babylon 5 and Farscape DVDs because I'm worried that they will disappear off a streaming service, and I love those shows. So I want to make sure I own them. Where I love the show Castle, but I don't need to own that. If that goes away from every streaming service I'm subscribed to, I'll find something else. But and kind of the same way, like, the Webtoon contracts are for 3 years. At a certain point, I could conceivably take it off. I mean, things are going great with Webtoons. I wouldn't do that right now. But once a digital service goes away, or the comic that you loved disappears and goes somewhere else, then suddenly it becomes a little more important to own a copy people can't take from you.
Yeah, and I guess with the online stuff, you don't know if somebody's about to pull the plug, because they don't say, well, we're having trouble, things are a little rocky, your check is you don't know. And they're in Korea, so
oh yeah. So once you go, it's like any big tech disaster. Like I had my computer crash back in 2005, and it almost took most of the stuff I was working on with me. I happened to have a backup I didn't expect. And now because of that, I have a Drobo and a Backblaze, I have a secondary power unit, because once you go through that crisis, you prepare for it. So the same way, once a couple comics that people really like start disappearing, people will consume them a little differently, or they'll be a little more cautious about which ones stick around, which ones they're willing to pay and commit for, and which ones are different.
Yeah, because like you said, with certain TV shows, there's a fan base, but not enough of a fan base for them to make a DVD, or not enough of a fan base for them to put it online. I think not like in the old days when they would repurpose old TV shows because there weren't enough new TV shows to fill the void. Now there's like a ton of stuff, so they can be pretty choosy about that,
Yeah, and like there's all sorts of like weird stuff that you get into with like rights issues with TV shows, and like some of the stuff I'm on the DC Universe app, but some of the stuff I really want to read isn't there, because they don't want to have it for one reason or another, or if you're a fan of the Transformers comic, you can't get all the issues anymore because IDW has the license, but they don't have the license of the issue that had Spider-Man, or trying to track DC comics, DC Star Trek comics, that those kind of things. Like the thing I'm not spending a lot profligately right now. It's more I've got everything tied up in room and board, but I never got those DC and Marvel reprint collections, the ones that collected Superman, Spider-Man, and Batman, Hulk, those kind of things. And I realized like those are out of print, and DC and Marvel are not looking to reprint that. Like I can get copies of Superman up and down, but I'm not going to be able to get a copy of X-Men Teen Titans unless I own that one from before, or because those things are out of print now.
Hey Tom, let's run it back a little bit. For some people who may be new to you or new fans of yours who may not know about the iceberg, this is one of my new things I've started talking about. All of us have our icebergs, right? Where some people just may know about the tip over the water surface, but underneath there's a lot you may not see.
Jagged danger.
so much danger.
It's just jagged danger.
I'm just going to pander to the audience now. You see, I'm very complicated because I
love it.
So
do you want to maybe tell people how you kind of got into the business, or what you were doing before, which kind of put you on the path you're on now?
I have always wanted to be a cartoonist. I was diseased like that, probably because I did a header out of a shopping cart when I was 2.5. My mom was supportive. My dad was very supportive. My mom, it was more like, it's when you say you want to be a cartoonist, it's like saying I want to go play in the NBA, which was a sport that people used to play when people got together. Where there's always a new crop of people who are coming out, but you have to, it's still a big ask to be able to get in there. Yeah. So I think she was a little worried about that, where it wasn't that she didn't think I could make it. It's just like, wow, your odds are really small. So I got good grades. I did all that stuff in school. And then I went off to the Quebert school. I trained there for 3 years. It was very much boot camp for artists. I'm glad I went, and I'm gladder now that I went than I was before. I think there's a thing that happens when you go to college where college is preparing you for a world that's not the world that you get out to, because it can't be. Like, everything changes too much. And I remember for a while I was kind of irritated. There's just these things where you think, oh man, we should have more computers. Like if I had learned more computer stuff, I'd be better prepared. But the thing I figured out long term is that Joe was training us to be Will Eisner, and that doesn't suck, because I'm not necessarily great at everything, but I can do everything, and it makes a huge difference if I don't have to hire a designer or a letterer or a colorist. You know, I'm the only person who I have to pay my own crappy rates to, and that gives me a lot more flexibility to make decisions. Because jumping ahead a little bit, years ago when I first participated in Free Comic Book Day, like I didn't have to convince anyone that it was a good idea. Like once I decided it was a good idea, then I just had to implement it, and I had to work with the printing. But everything else was like it was sweat equity. It wasn't, you know, having to pay someone, having to convince my boss that it was a good idea, and I like that flexibility. So after I graduated the Cupid school, there was a thing in our third year where you could drop out of some classes to work on a special project to, you know, ideally what you really want to get into. And the thing that I did was I almost dropped out of caricature class because I said, I'm never going to use this. I'm going to be drawing the X-Men. So my first job out of school was doing caricatures at an amusement park. I worked at Yaga Lake here in Ohio for the summer. That was a lot of fun. That gets you better. And it's so the way you get, at least the way when I was there, you got the job is you had to audition. So instead of like showing a resume, you went and you wound up having to draw the manager, and then they hired you based on it. And at the end of the year, there's this big party and, you know, dinner for everybody, and then they bring out the drawings that they hired you on. Yeah. And I was drawing I got hired in May, you know, the season was over in September, and you're looking at the drawings going, why did you think you could make money off that? That's horrible. But I realized, like I did the math once, and I drew 3,000 caricatures over the summer, and that gets you better. Like,
and then you have to talk to people too, right? You get people skills too, right?
Yeah. And especially for like conventions, and when I give kids career days, I always tell them, you know, to do art because you want to do art. I said, take speech class and take accounting class. Because if you're going to run your own business, you need to know how to do the numbers. I wish I had done that. And with speech class, I'm lucky that I was okay with it anyway. And then working at the park got me better in just being able to talk to people cold. But when you talk to an editor, when you talk to somebody coming by your booth, you can't be like, oh, well, this is my comic. It's kind of cool. Would you like to check it out? Like you need to, you know,
yeah.
Just the ability to make eye contact and smile at someone and not be creepy. That's a great skill set to have. It's not as common in comics as you might think.
It's true. It's true. Jamar and I have joked about that. You'll be at a show and you'll watch somebody at their table down and you watch them repulse people from their table because of their like their booth manner. It's either like they're like, don't come and look at my comic, or don't talk to me. So they're like, oh, that's like, it's like they just turned the light on in their booth. You know, they just they turn the light down. You know,
pull the blind down. Yeah.
Right. And then there's guys like, you know, Chris Yambar, who could sell anything to anybody. You know what I mean? Because he just had that kind of personality that he would get people to come over. You know, and you're like that. You're very engaging and friendly. And hey, come, you know, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he actually and Tom actually stays at his table.
I do. Well, I can't. Will make you do that because when you say I'm paying $3,500 for this space, I'm gonna suck the marrow out of that. Yeah. I would sleep at that table if I could.
You're taking it back to your room and putting it in a refrigerator.
Yeah. There is no time that this is being wasted. No.
Yeah. So that sounds like a really good tool you got to put in your kit doing that summer, doing caricatures. Did that change any of your, I don't know, trajectory? Like, did you love that or start doing more of that than you thought you would?
I really liked it. I didn't like giving up my summer, and I didn't like the hours. I mean, it was fine when I was 21, but I didn't want to work at that pace because I couldn't do much else. And then, but what happened was after Geauga Lake, I worked at a newspaper doing production a couple days a week. Back when you did paste up with like waxers and all that kind of stuff. I also wound up doing a lot of private parties. And so as opposed to when you're at the amusement park, a lot of time there's a base rate and then you get paid per drawing. But there are other times that you get hired to do like an after prom and you charge them $500 a night, or, you know, $100 an hour to draw at somebody's birthday party. And that helped me. All those kind of jobs helped me when I eventually went freelance, because I did the newspaper for a while. I became a graphic artist for a few years. I went to an ad agency and I was an art director there for a while. And then 2001, I went off on my own. The part of the story I always feel weird about telling, but it's kind of important, but it's weird because I feel like it gets reductive, is I had been thinking about leaving my job for a while. There was a thing that happened with my boss, because when I first started working, my boss was phenomenal. And then there was a lot more like micromanaging stuff that happened. And like, I get it. Like, from running my own business, it's hard to let go. It's why I don't have employees. You know? But there was a thing that happened where I just said, oh, I don't know that I want to work here anymore. Like, I don't know that I want to work for anyone anymore. It's the first time I had that thought. And I started preparing for that back in January of 2001. Like, I bought a pretend house where I would just put a house payment away every month, because I was living with my parents and it was, you know, things were pretty flexible, and I just built for it. And then after September 11th, it really crystallized things. I'm like, oh, well, maybe it's time you go. Like, it's, you know, it was that kind of kick in the complacency. And the part I'm always nervous about telling the story is it sounds like I don't want to make one of the most horrible events to happen in America be about how I started cartooning, but in the way it directly affected me. Like, there's that point where, like, it does make you reconsider a couple things and take a different jump. So yeah, I went off on my own in November 2001, and it's been almost 20 years, and I haven't looked back.
Well, look. I mean, you could say that about the World War II generation that had so many great cartoonists, right? They had something horrible happen. Nobody wanted it to happen. They went off to war, and then when they came back, how many people went to did the GI Bill, answered ads? I mean, all basically the Marvel bullpen. Those guys were all in the war for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Quebert, all those guys, right? And part of what you were saying about Joe is he's one of the smartest guys ever in comics, because he started that school. You know, and I think he got that from Eisner, who was also another super, super smart guy.
Oh yeah, I mean they owned some of their own stuff. They made like, they knew how to work in that system. Like, it is very telling to me that when Joe passed away, there was no, and the fund for his medical bills is here. It's like, no, Joe had that covered. And he made a lot of smart decisions that way, where, like, I like the part where I get paid, and he really beat that indie. Like, it. He always said that it was, you had, if you were going to be a cartoonist, you had to want to do it so much you would do it if nobody was paying you. But he was also very clear about making sure he got paid. Like, there was a business real aspect to it that was very important.
Yeah. He was not like that old Disney short where he's taking one bean and cutting it very thinly, you know?
Exactly.
No. And I think that although I didn't go to the Quebert school, I was very aware of guys like him and Eisner and Neil Adams as being very smart business-wise, very early in realizing that's really the model you want to try to go after. Even if you work for the majors, is not to have that victim mentality that some of the older guys fell into later on. If your style falls out of favor or whatever, you know, the new editor doesn't know your work, doesn't call you on the phone. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of that happened a lot in the 80s. There was that transition.
Yeah, comics went from being a factory to being a rock show. You know, it stopped being about could you get work done and just get our next book out, to what kind of audience do you bring, and what can you do for us now, which is how I think comics are now. And especially in the 80s when the transition happened, there were a lot of people who they were on the wrong side of it, because they were used to, I think that was the last generation that probably broke in, and then they were there until things changed, where now you're constantly improving yourself. And I had something similar happen so the thing I was best at Quebert out of the gate was lettering. and nobody liked to letter. I used to get paid in pizzas for my because you get assigned where you had to letter them, but they weren't grading you on the lettering. So, guys next to me go, "Hey, I'll get you a pizza if you letter this for me." I'm like, "Deal." And it was before computer lettering was probably about a year or two away from happening at all, and a couple years away from being really prevalent.
Comic
So
Sans.
I was yeah.
Comic Sans.
Comic Sans. That God, what was the one that was based on John Costanza's work? It was like the first one. It was
like Whiz Bang or something.
Yeah, Whiz Bang. That was it.
Right.
Oh, good Lord. But because I did that, like I saw the computer lettering wave coming, and I could get enough lettering work to eventually get the computer so that I could go that way for a while when I wanted to. But like my job wasn't lettering. My job was being employed. So I need to make sure that I know what stuff is coming. And like nobody is as invested in me succeeding as me, with the possible exception of my mother. So because I always feel nervous in comics when you say you got to watch out for number one, because that's when your uncle gets killed by a mugger. You have to very much be in control of your career and not at the whims of some other company, because they're not watching out for you. And like they don't have to. It'd be nice if they did, but ultimately, like they have things they have to keep track of too. So it's your job to keep track of the stuff you need to keep track of, like paying for your house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that it's more typical today that when something goes south, it suddenly goes south. Like in the old days, I think you kind of saw sales went down, and people were like, oh, it's not looking good. We're going to try to do something, whatever. There was a period of where you could adjust. You didn't walk up one day and like, the door is gone. The website has disappeared, I mean, even in the early 2000s, I had a couple deals that were going to be big, like one of them maybe even a 6-figure deal, and like one day that website just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah,
it's like that, like in just imploded, like in like a black hole just took them out. No, you never hear anything from anybody. No more emails are returned. If you had sent them something, no way to contact to get it back. And I think that's typical now, which is why I'm really interested in you doing the Webtoon thing, because I sort of see it. There's people like you, maybe like me or Jamar, that are adaptable, and there's other people like in the 90s, we're not buying computers. Like, no, never going to buy a computer. I'm not doing anything with that. And then eventually what happens is like, oh, you want your script? What's your email address? Mm-hmm. We're not faxing it anymore.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy of trying to go into doing that from the self-publishing? Because it's a different thing.
Yeah. So I've always thought of myself as a storyteller, period. And liking licensed material, that was always something I noticed, where you'd get comic books. Like it bothered me when the Star Trek comic tried to write episodes, or the Buffy comic felt like it was writing people's lost spec scripts, where when Joss Whedon wrote it, he's like, it's a comic book. I don't have a budget. There's going to be a giant monster, and it's going to take place in a place I can't afford, and I'm going to write. One of the things I love about Joss Whedon's comic book work is he actually remembers that it's a comic, and he writes like shorter, pithier. You don't get a lot of monologues, but that always taught me to write the medium, not so small stories, big stories, web comics, comic strips. Like I know how to tell stories in different formats. So what happened a few years ago was I was at Baltimore, and I got introduced to Tom Akel, who worked at Webtoons. And we had a great conversation. He came over to my booth the next day, because I was at my booth, Jamar. And he asked about the long distance comic I did, and I started giving the pitch, and he said, I'll buy it. And I didn't know what to do because I've never not finished the pitch. Nobody's ever been that active to get it. The thing that was really interesting for doing webcomics is that I kind of carved out a space doing romance comics and like more slice of life personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this was that like there's no reason as an independent guy to do a straight superhero story, because if you want that, DC and Marvel are publishing reams of those every month, but they're not doing stories about people in happy relationships. So that was very different. So there was an audience that I could take care of that was not getting served by the other companies. And when you go into webcomics, romance is huge. Like I'm a utility infielder in comics, and webcomics, I'm a left-handed reliever. So that worked really well. I pitched them 3 or 4 different ideas. They picked the one that I didn't think they were going to pick. They picked Warning Label. And there was very much this moment of, oh, I didn't really think you're going to pick that one. I don't know how to do this. It took me a little bit to learn the format. Tom Akel was really good about explaining things. Like he explained how the pages broke down, and it's different storytelling because you're telling basically 5 or 6 page chapters, and then you're trying to end on a cliffhanger or something to get people to come back for the next week. Like even the way they used to launch was they would launch with 3 news strips. So your first one had to have the hook to keep people reading, and the third one had to have the cliffhanger to make them come back for the next week. Mm-hmm. And knowing that and having that structure made it easier to format the story, but you still had to. I find that there are people in our industry who, when they get offered an opportunity like that, they're trying to figure out a way to work to do their thing the way they want, and they're not necessarily serving the format of what they've got to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, it's kind of my problem with a lot of modern comics these days, where I don't want to read your take on Daredevil. I want to read Daredevil. Like, Daredevil was a character. Like, if I get hired to write Grey's Anatomy, I don't get to make it dark and bleak in a different version. Like, I have to write Grey's Anatomy. That's the story. So I did Warning Label, and even then, like, we've been through it enough where you get offered this great opportunity, and you think, well, like, there's only so many times the anvil can fall on you before you feel like it's not going to happen. So everything about Webtoon sounded great, and I'm like, well, this may not work. So I came up with a finite story. It was supposed to be 26 chapters. And like I had planned out, like it was always designed to turn into a print comic real easy, just in case Webtoon went away and I wanted to finish it. It was designed to end because I'm a big fan of endings for stories. Mm-hmm. Like if you're doing something in pen, if you're not creating Superman or working on Star Trek, like I don't want to do, I don't want to say Game of Thrones because it's not accurate yet. I don't want to do like Dune or one of those stories where the author says, I'm going to do these 10 stories and then, gets hit by a bus at volume 9 and doesn't get to finish it. Like I want to finish this. When I did Love and Capes, every 6 issues was designed to be a place where I could leave. I'm like, if I do one, I'll do 6, but that's the commitment I'm making to you as a reader, that I'm going to finish this part. And then you'll be okay with it. And then hopefully I'll come back for more.
Right. So you can come back to it, but you wanted to say, if I never come back to it, the people that invested in it feel satisfied that we get to a point.
Yeah. I had a 3-year plan for Love and Capes when I started it. It was supposed to be ends with the engagement, ends with the marriage, and ends with the kid. And then I realized that wasn't enough room, so I had to go 4. And then I've come back and I've done a 5th one now. But it's very much choosing to come back to that story. And when I did Warning Label, it was designed to, that story had a definite ending. I expanded the story out. It wound up being 39 chapters instead of 26. It did well enough. Webtoon was happy to do that. And even now on Cupid's Arrow, because they would have loved for me to keep doing Warning Label, but honestly, there was no place to take that story. Like I couldn't keep emotionally abusing the main character. You couldn't keep kicking that can down the road. And it was super scary working at Webtoon for that because of the print process. When you do a print comic, I was able to get enough of my book out to like the bunch of readers that I have to look things over, where they could check things out and I could adjust or an issue would come out and I could change what was going to happen in the next issue based on some comment that made sense to me. But with Webtoon, I had to have that ending because I was going through them once a week. Like in Warning Label, the main character is cursed by her ex-boyfriend, that every guy who asks her out gets the warning label of what you need to watch out for. And everything on the list would eventually go away, but I had to write that list, and like I couldn't go back in and change it later the way that I could on a print comic because it hadn't seen print yet. Like, no, you launched this, you better figure out how to solve every one of those because that's not written in stone.
Right.
New one I'm doing, Cupid's Arrows, is a it's kind of like the Thin Man meets Cupid meets Grosse Point Blank. It's a pair of Cupids that hang on a minute. It's a pair of Cupids that go together, getting couples together.
Right.
That's designed to be a lot more open-ended. But I've got an ending in mind for the book, and every time I sign on for another season, like it's more built to keep going, but it's not designed to go forever. There's going to be some point where I'm going to be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a question, Tom, from James Allen. I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but James wants to know: is anybody earning income from Webtoons? What's the real deal?
Yes,
What's really going on? Tell him, Tom.
There are 2 levels at Webtoon. They've changed the names of them a couple different times. There's Canvas, which is like YouTube, where you can put your stuff up and you get a cut of the revenue that comes from the ads being up there. Or you can come in at the featured level. I forget what this is called now, but that's actually a contract where they pay you per week. And then on top of that, you get incentives based on, how many people are buying coins or what your numbers are, anything like that. That's the level that I came in on. So I never went through the discovery process. I was just kind of discovered and brought in. And that has been phenomenal. Webtoon has honestly been the most successful thing that I've done.
Wow, that's great.
I don't, that level isn't, not everyone's going to be at that level, but I was lucky. I think as opposed to so much other timing that happens in careers in comics, like I found Webtoon at exactly the point they were looking for someone like me. And I got in at exactly the right time because I feel like Webtoon has exploded enough in the United States where I don't know how many of those deals are there. I don't know what like their operating budget or how much space they have for this kind of stuff is. But I feel like they don't need to actively recruit as much talent because when I was there, everybody was trying to figure out if this was actually going to work. And now people see that it works. So now they want to be there.
Right.
So they can be a little more picky.
Yeah. The amount of new Webtoons that go up every day is like crazy.
Yeah. It's an insane amount of content.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I always say is really exciting because it shows you how many people actually want to do comics. I think it was easy to sort of perceive that in the direct market because of the structure and how would you get in, and how I got in is not like how people get in now. Maybe there aren't going to be as many people doing comics, but then you see Webtoons, there's literally hundreds of people wanting to do comics, but they just don't want to do Spider-Man or Batman or whatever, but they want to tell stories with that format, that medium.
Yeah, there's a lot of like comics, I think because of the direct market, played very safe with selling the things they knew they could sell. But the more outlets you have, like Webtoon is serving the place that spinner racks used to. Like it is a place to discover comics where my aunt asked me like 10 years ago, are they still making Batman comics? I'm like, what I do for a living. Like, how do you not know that they still make Batman comics? Like, how bad is DC at what they're doing that people don't know that they still make Batman comics? But Webtoons is a place where people can find new content, and it is, you go where the people are. Comic shops are fantastic, but they're to a very particular audience. And like when we were growing up, you would go to the grocery store, pick up comics, and then eventually build your collecting habit to the point that you find out like, oh, what's this thing called Nexus? I hear people talking about it, but I don't see it on, at Convenient. And then you see the next level, but now they're asking you to buy in the complicated level. And it's one of the few entertainment venues that do that. Like people are buying Disney Plus, but it's because they know what's on Disney Plus. You know,
Right.
DC is able to sell DC Universe based on the success of the Arrowverse stuff, but they gave the Arrowverse for free. That was where people were, and then you can build up from there. But it's really weird, you know, like Quibi did that, where we're going to launch a super weird, different format and not have a place for people to find it really easily. That doesn't work.
Well, now one of the things I do notice too is that because of the anime and the manga constantly growing, there's a lot more women and young females reading comics, also wanting to create comics as a result of that. So I'd imagine that your readership must be pretty high on the female side, right?
I think so. I don't have any actual numbers, but even with Love and Capes, I was skewing heavily female. And part of that, like when my mom was a kid, she read comics. You know, there was, you know, she and her sister read Hawkman and Black Hawk and stuff like that. But they also read like Little Lulu and books like that. As those books disappeared, like comics very much started pandering to one audience. It'd be like if TV shows decided we're going to make nothing but Westerns.
Right.
And I think that was the survival mode for the comic companies, but it cut out an audience. And it wasn't that they didn't want to read comics. You would see it in like newspaper strips seem to have a very broad demographic because they're appealing to everybody. Now, newspapers being what they are, that's not a super awesome example. But, you know, the Bloom County, Garfield, Far Side, those books, those strips have always been grabbing things. You know, the interest has always been there. People haven't been serving.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's happening now that is different in entertainment in general, I think, and you see it a lot with, especially like some of the Marvel movies and the DC movies, where as it becomes easier to make a thing that looks professional, like, you know, just I'm rewatching Babylon 5 because I have a little bit of quarantine time, not a ton, weirdly, but a little bit. And you see how the production values slowly get better, but you realize like that show was done on a shoestring budget as a syndicated show in a way that you could not have done that show 20 years ago. And kind of the same way as it becomes cheaper to make entertainment, you can start going after, you don't feel like you have to hit a broad target audience. You can start hitting the people who aren't being taken care of. And you see that with sci-fi and superhero shows where, like, I think we all remember when the John Wesley Shipp Flash came on. Like, I felt like I had to watch it because I wanted more, and that was all we had. And CBS wasn't going to do, you know, an entire network full of superhero shows because that would be crazy. Like, who would there be enough of an audience to justify that kind of budget? And now the CW is virtually a whole bunch of superhero shows, but they're also numbers that the CW shows make would not be enough to keep it on a network. You saw that happen with Supergirl, but because of the advertisers, like they're hitting exactly the people they need to hit with that, and they can do it at a price that makes sense. So the cheaper things get, the more varied you can get with what you see out there.
I want to go back to the room, Tom.
Okay.
Our good buddy Bob Harrison. Hey, Bob. Says, Tom, can you talk about what you did with the new Love and Capes arc for local comic shops during the shutdown? Thanks, Bob.
Hey, Bob. Yeah. That was the local heroes thing that I had mentioned where I made individual issues available to retailers. And they were branded for the shops. So that's the thing I'm referring to. But that was, I don't know, as we were all going through that was super important to do just to make sure that the shops that were open had some new content. And it's one of those, you need to take advantage of those situations, as horrible as they are. Like, if comics companies are going to stop publishing, there's never a better time to get a new piece of art out there, because it's the one point where the signal to noise ratio really drops down. Like, you need to do what you can to get noticed. And I was fortunate that I had most of the work done already and had a capability to do it. But you have to pay attention to those things rather than just doing what everybody else is doing, because it's hard to stand out from the herd when you're with the herd.
Mm-hmm. I have another question. So I'm going at the beginning. So J. Robert Deans, he preloaded the chat with questions. So JRD says, and we're cross branding here. He's talking about your old podcast. JRD says, Tom, I miss Comics Assembled, which literally helped me get my book off the ground. With the landscape of creating and marketing changing with COVID, will another CA season take place with new advice?
Oh, I really appreciate that. There aren't any plans currently. Brian and I are both kind of eking by right now, and there's not. I could do a podcast. I don't want to do the marketing for a podcast. Like I'm not built for that right now. It's not that I would never do it. Also, a lot of the COVID stuff would be just me and Brian talking about what we're cooking, because that seems to be
cooking comics. There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
I have a cookbook. I've done a couple of recipes from that. Yeah, but I would love to come back to it sometime, but now is not going to be the time, unfortunately.
Well, luckily for you, you have Pencil to Pencil to watch.
Yes.
Okay, here's a writing question. And Tom, I want you to talk about My Little Pony for a second before I get to this.
Sure.
So can you tell us about how you got involved in that universe?
So I was working with IDW, and I was doing Love and Capes for them. Are you guys still there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All of a sudden, my screen went completely black. So I just wanted to let you know that because that was like out of nowhere.
Right.
So I was working with IDW, and I was doing Love and Capes for them. So I had a relationship with some of the editors. And when I did that, they announced My Little Pony. And I know that IDW being IDW is going to do like 6 trillion covers. And I said, could I get one? Like, it would be cool to do a My Little Pony cover. And it'd be, I can hit stuff on a deadline. And Bobby Curnow, the editor, said, do you want to pitch the book? And I said, well, I'm not an idiot. Yes, I'm going to pitch that book. Because it was right after, like, that was the Comic-Con where they announced that Katie and Andy's first issue of My Little Pony hit 1 million orders. And IDW was smart because they weren't just going to comic book shops, because kind of the way we talk about like different audiences and comic book shops, they were selling through Hot Topic, and Hot Topic knew how to sell My Little Pony stuff in a way that a comic shop doesn't sell My Little Pony stuff. So I mainlined the show. I was surprised by it because it, like, I don't know why it's a hit, but I know why it's not a failure. Like, it's really good. Like, the 6 characters, there's a reason for the 6 main characters. There's a reason for each one of them to like each other and a reason for them to hate each other. And there's like instant drama there. I pitched on for a while the Strawberry Shortcake comic. This was after My Little Pony. And it made me appreciate Pony because those characters all got along and all they did was sell stuff to each other. They all had their own shops. And like, I don't understand how that economy works. They're just trading dollars back and forth. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you got to keep it in the community.
Yeah. Like, that's not how this works. And like, the characters had no conflict. Like, they all get along. Like, the crew in the first season of Next Generation, it's just boring. Where with My Little Pony, one of the things that happened a lot was you would pitch a story and they would say, oh, we have something like that in the chain already. And while that was frustrating, it also lets you know that you're on the right track because the characters are so well defined. So I did the first issue. I wrote and drew that one. I only drew the one. I didn't have a great deadline on the first one. I think I would do it better now. But honestly, I don't like having to stay on model. So I just assumed just right. And then I kept pitching stories, and eventually I did a bunch of the side book Friends Forever, which essentially was Brave and the Bold with ponies. You team up 2 ponies and they'd have their own adventure. Then I wrote a bunch of stuff for the main series. One of them was collected in a tabloid edition, which is kind of cool because they don't make a lot of those anymore. I did an Evil Ponies arc that's kind of based on an old Justice Society issue. And yeah, like you can tell surprisingly deep and nuanced stories. And the important part is you just don't get lost in you don't get lost in parody. Like if you tell a joke that is a reference, you want it to be like The Simpsons. Like The Simpsons would tell jokes, and I wouldn't know what they were referring to, but it was still funny. But then when you find out what they were referring to, it's a whole different level to it.
Right.
You know, or Star Trek references and stuff like that. But the jokes have to work on their own. Like you shouldn't have to know what came. You shouldn't have to know what I'm referencing to understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, I've been doing that since like 2013. And it's been great. Pony fans are by and large amazing. I know sometimes I get a bad rap in comics, but being a Star Trek fan, I'm used to socially awkward people who like things way too much. And for the most part, like it's like any other fandom or any other group. Like 90% of them are awesome. 5% are super socially awkward, and there's a couple percent that don't know they're furries yet. But you know, there are a lot of different comics, so that you know, it's nothing different. But it's just this thing that really resonates, and I've had some of the best experiences I've had at conventions from My Little Pony. There was, I think I was in Calgary, and this kid came up and was talking to me, and you know how you get those booth barnacles at your table and they just won't leave. And I'm talking to this, and he seemed old enough, and I was starting to lose it. Like it was starting to be the, you know, good day, sir. No, good day. Services are no longer required. But I held together, and then he left, and then his mom walked up and said, "My son is autistic and he doesn't speak, but he came to talk to you." And she thanked me for doing it, and I was glad to have done it. That's the kind of thing that it keeps you from losing it too much, because you have it like that. And supposedly there's something about My Little Pony where the character designs are so simple that autistic people can see and react to those faces differently than they can human faces, because they're less complicated and they make more sense to them. And it's just a joy to be part of that. And like, just to have kids come up to your table rather than like, I'll talk to 35-year-old men who want to buy my book all day long, but like, I like seeding the next generation and, you know, getting people when they're younger and getting them to love comics and stories and hopefully, you know, good lessons in some of the pony books and just stuff like that. It's been.
You still said good day, sir. You, in the end, you still said good day. I tipped my hat to you, my lady. Yeah, it's fun when you get little kids, because they don't really know what it's all about, but their enthusiasm is like really honest, and they don't really have like agendas. They're like, "Oh, what is this?" And they're really interested. It's the same way if you teach a cartooning class. The little kids are really interested. Then you get to the 13, 14-year-old. That's a hard age to teach, because they're a little bit, they're like kind of skeptical about everything. And then when you get to like 18 or 19, then it changes again, you know? But yeah, it's fun to see like a little kid at a show, if they're really, like I taught a class one year, and all the kids were like totally obsessed with SpongeBob. And they could tell you everything about SpongeBob. There's 7 or 8. They can tell you all these like details about Patrick's relationship with SpongeBob and Squidward. And I was just really amazed that, and especially this one kid, I mean, he was like drawing SpongeBob comics. So have you had anybody bring up comics of stuff that you've done, like drawings of fan art of stuff you've done?
I've had some fan art for Cupid's Arrows and Warning Label. That seems to be very much in the webtoon manga style. Like that seems to be part of the currency they trade in. Like I know Katie Cook gets a ton of fan art for Nothing Special, and it's great. I love seeing it. I love doing something that resonates with somebody else, that it's stuck in their head. I remember seeing Straczynski when he was still doing Babylon 5, And he said, I've had all these words in my head like Minbari and Narn and Vorlons, and now they're in your head. And he says, and I love that. And I love that they live on and bond with people to that degree. There was some woman who came up to me at a show crying because she said Warning Label made her a better person. I'm like, I've gotten to the point where I try to be very appreciative of those comments, because there's a part where I think your natural reaction, especially for people like in our line of work, where you want to deflect it, and I think it's important just to accept it.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't setting out to change anyone's life, but oh my God, I'm glad it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember. I think it was last Free Comic Book Day, not whatever happened this year, where we were up in Maryland at Mark and Shelley's store, and I was set up next to Steve Conley and America's Tom Zahler, and there was a line that was kind of wrapping around the place, and I kind of eyed this one young lady who was like vibrating and turning all types of colors because she was going to meet Tom Zahler, and I was like, "Yo, Tom, that's you right there." And she couldn't speak. She was like shaking. I think she started to cry a little bit. And I thought, like, that's not funny. I'm not setting this up to be funny, but it's like there is an impact that you can put on people. And I think it's a very important thing to be mindful of. It's like meeting your heroes. She met Tom Zahler that day. And if he was like, "Oh, I really need to pee, I'll be back," you would have crushed her.
Well, mostly I did it for the money. Really respectful of that. Like, first, there was a whole thing I remember that used to go on like in the 90s, early 2000s, where people would bag on San Diego. And San Diego is its own huge Comic-Con type thing. But first of all, the worst part of my career is when I got to fly out to San Diego and talk about the thing I love doing more than anything else in the world for a week. Like, I got friends who wear ties. Like, I'm winning at that. And the same way with the fans, where like you see some creators, and I think it was bigger years back, where like it was very much the geek stereotype, and just people, and like, but they're paying for you. Like, you need to respect your audience a little bit more. And with Webtoon, especially because so many of them skew so young, because they've got a big teen readership, and I think that's part of why. Because I've had a non-zero number of people come up to me crying, and that's only a little bit My Little Pony. It's mostly only Webtoon, because I think it's hitting people at the point where those stories are resonating to a huge degree. Like, they haven't gotten jaded yet. They're mainlining it. And I want to be really, and I think we all should be really appreciative of that. Like, they're letting us do our job, and we're trying to do things that resonate.
Yeah, I remember my first Chicago convention, and there was a couple big wigs at this panel, and fans come up and they're nervous to kind of ask their hero a question, and it might be a question you've heard 100 times, but they've never asked it, right? They've never asked, "What about those adamantium claws?" or "What about whatever?" And seeing, these pros kind of like, really? I just thought that's just a dick move, straight up. It's like, you don't. Now, if the fan comes up as rude and gets in your face and does something bad, okay, that's different. But you don't disrespect somebody who's supporting you. That's just like, that's not a good move. Because one day you might be at the show when your star is not so high, and you're like, "Hey, my booth's here, everyone," and they'll be like, "Yeah, I remember you."
Yeah, and like, it's something I remember having a conversation with somebody where they were worried about going up and speaking to, it was some creator or some actor, and I'm like, has anyone ever come up to you and told you they like your writing and you didn't appreciate that? Like, you don't want to try to have a conversation while a guy is going into the bathroom, sure, but like especially with the pony fans, there's so many that come up and like the words are getting in the way, and I just try to make it really welcoming because like I know what you're trying to say, and I've been where you are. Like I've been tongue tied and said like I remember meeting Joss Whedon when Buffy was still on the air, and that was awesome, but that was hard. And like you don't want to get shut down. You want that one moment where someone who's made something that's important to you like knows you exist too. Like that's mostly what I want, and I don't want to be a jerk. So it's like why when I met Shatner, I had a great time. I talked to him for like 30 seconds, and then I ran away before he could ruin it.
Before he could kirk you on the back of the neck.
Yeah. Tell you why I hate tall Irish people. No.
Yeah.
So yeah, just try to be cautious of that. And like we all have bad days, and times where your energy is the best. But you know, some of it is. I mean, it comes from what we do and being professional about it. Where there are times I really want to work, there are times I don't want to work at all. But that doesn't mean I don't get to work. Like you have to learn how to push through that, and at least I was thinking of it like the rangefinder game from Price is Right. Like you're trying to hit that red zone where like being the 10-20% of like you may be getting me at 90%, but that's still okay. Like that's an acceptable range of motion. Like you don't want to see the me that's irritated and ticked off, and that's not what they're coming for. They don't need to see
the THOM ZAHLER with the scratches on the face.
Yeah.
Give me brandy. I always admire you got like you or Mark McKenna, guys who are like these road warriors who do like all these shows. Because even doing one show or a couple shows a year is tough. So you're living out of the suitcase. You got to pack everything up, go on and do all that. It's a lot, and then be like be a showman, kind of being out there pushing your stuff. It's which is the exact opposite experience of you sitting there writing your material.
It's a thing I noticed that from doing caricatures, where I realized I really like talking to people. Like I miss human contact. I couldn't live quarantine lifestyle drawing guy. I couldn't be Bill Waterston. One, I'm not that talented, but two, like I like people too much. But it's a thing that I can run on, hold on, turn on and off. So like I love doing conventions and I love being home. The hardest part is when you hit one of those stretches where suddenly you're doing like 3 or 4 shows in a row, and there are shows, especially like in October, there's a stretch of like it's almost like Dragon Con, Cincinnati, Baltimore, New York are almost on top of each other or right in a row. And I love all those shows, and I love them all for different reasons. And I feel like I have to go there, and there's some that you feel like with shows, you almost feel like you don't want. Like I'm not at the level where I can decide to not do a show for a year, and they're going to be thrilled to have me back.
Yeah.
Like if they ask, I will always do Baltimore. But because of that, that stretch is really hard, and it's hard to. I could keep doing shows. The hard part is drawing in between those shows, because it always takes like a day to ramp back up and then do work and then ramp back down. And like if I could get paid to be THOM ZAHLER, I could do conventions all the time. But I have to also do the work that makes people want to see me at shows.
We'll just get you a Doom bot. Tom, I have a good question from our buddy Roger Ash. Roger asks, Tom, could you talk some about working on the Baltimore yearbook? Thanks,
sure.
Roger.
Mark Nathan is a horrible person, and then he got me drunk, and then I started working on the Baltimore yearbook.
The end.
The end. I was at Heroes Con with Mark, and he decided that he wanted to do one of those books, the hardcover sketchbooks. And it was he who came up with the idea of featuring a different independent creator. And this kind of goes to like we're saying about the Will Eisner Jack of all trades thing, where I had done a lot of work as a graphic designer, and I know how to spec printing. I know how to find printers. Like there's so many comic book guys who they don't I don't understand people who don't like track their orders at their booth, because I'm like, how do you know if this is successful? Like, how much did that book cost you to bring to the show? Because you need to know those numbers to know if it's worth doing. And I've been fortunate to figure that out enough where I'm good at that part. So when Mark started talking about wanting to do the book, suddenly I turned into, there's this scene in Star Trek IV where they're asking about the transparent aluminum, and Scotty says, how big would a piece of transparent or plexiglass need to be to hold the whales back? The guy says, 6x20. We carry that stuff in stock. And kind of the same way when Mark was asking about the book, I'm like, oh yeah, we could do like 1,000 book hardcover. Like that'd run you roughly about this amount, and it'd be about a month to get it done. So we did the first one, and I kind of freaked out in the middle of it, and Mark had to talk me down because we weren't getting, I felt like we didn't have enough of the artists participating. Like people said they would do it, and then stuff wasn't showing up. And that was
surprising.
I was ready for some of that. I know our people.
I'm not saying anything.
All of a sudden, Jamar is, I can neither confirm or deny actions, which I did not witness. Where it's very much a balancing act, and like real deadlines and skewed deadlines, and figuring out like how much room do you have for somebody to mess your world up. Like near the end of the yearbook, there's always like 2 or 3 different versions of it, where this is the version if nobody else gets a piece in. This is the version where if we get 1 more piece in, and this is the version where if we get 3 more pieces, because it'll affect page counts, which affects printing. It'll affect, like when you get into some printing, you have to deal with, it's not just a piece of paper folded in half, but it's a register. So you can't think in 4s, you think in 8s. So getting 1 more piece of art can really ruin your day, and you wind up creating a variant version where like the biographies in the back are suddenly 1 page shorter, and you've squished them down a little bit more so that you can fit this one in if you need to. It's a balancing act, and I love doing it. Like I've had some of the best experiences with artists working on it. I've seen some amazing pieces. I think it drives people to the table, and that was an accident on the first one, where there was an artist who was running late. That wasn't Jamar, and they really wanted to have the piece, but we couldn't get it because the book had gone. So we decided to do a series of prints that if you got enough signatures, you could get the print. And what that did was it made people go to multiple artists and meet them and see them and get their signature. And it pushed traffic to the table, which I think is great and is part of why you have comic conventions. And that's become a huge part of the book too. Like who's going to be a print, and how many signatures do people have to get, and how do we set that form up so people can find them? And it's been great. Like I got to work with Terry Moore. I got to work with Stan Sakai. We got to work with the Archie characters, which was surprisingly frictionless. Like they were the closest thing to a big company we had worked with. And I was really worried about like them pushing back on images or people doing the wrong thing with images. And there's always that line you have to walk. And I would say like 98% of the interactions we've had with people have been great, where, you're worried about someone drawing something super inappropriate with a character, or an artist feeling like, oh, this does not fit the image of what I think my character is. Right. And those interactions have been super, super limited.
I'm sorry. I thought again.
No, you guys are great. And the one that honestly was it was on top of a lot of stuff, and it was in a really weird time, but I loved being able to work on the Telos one. Yeah. And because at the same time, and it was time to do it, we were getting the Telos books ready, and I wound up lettering a lot of that and running production on it. So I was getting both of those done at the same time, and working on Time and Vine, and teaching classes. It was not an awesome
and not sleeping.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. There.
I know that book.
I'll give myself the screen.
Yeah.
Slowly I turn, says Tom Zahler.
That's beautiful. Look at that.
It's gloss. Yeah. That's gloss.
This is all Tom. Beautiful.
Gloss and foil.
Look at that. Good job, Tom Zahler.
Thanks. They're just beautiful. It's an honor to work on them. I love being able to do those. There's
Go ahead.
like 3 days in a row where I regret every decision I've ever made that brought me to this point. But other than that, it's fantastic.
Hey, Emily. Emily says getting the signatures in the yearbook hello is a great way to meet creators with a conversation starter for those who might be shy. That's a great point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives you a reason to talk to them, and you've got an instant common thing, and you get to discover all sorts of artists that you haven't like met before. And yeah, it's just an amazing thing.
Bob Harrison says, Tom, how much input do the creator owners have on the images that you use in the yearbook? Has anyone ever said, no, I don't want that in the book?
Yes, that has happened. I will say there were 2 images in the Archie book that Archie said, yeah, we're not super comfortable with those. But out of a book that had almost 100 images, that wasn't that bad.
I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I told you.
I don't see.
You just got to put pants on them. That's all.
Oh, see, that's no fun. I like my pantsless Archie. Pantsless Riverdale. That's going to be a new trend.
They darn near do that on the book, on the TV show.
JRD says that yearbook is amazing. They are all gorgeous, and Tom does great work and is also gorgeous. It also gave me the great opportunity to draw Ringo's characters. Thanks, JRD. Hey, Tom, before we run out of time, I wanted to ask you a style question, and then wanted to invite you to share some images if you still wanted to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so here's my style question. So when I first met you, Tom Zahler, you were doing a little book called Raider.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that you've done since Raider is drawn in a completely different style. So I would like to ask you, Tom Zahler, what brought that on? And have you ever found your comfortability in your style? Or are you still kind of like tweaking the dials or, moving things around a little bit?
Yeah, I'm constantly tweaking the dials. And there's no place I'm completely comfortable. And I always try to challenge myself in every new thing that I do. So with long distance, it was coming up with a different color palette. With Time and Vine, it was all the history stuff. With Warning Label, it was a limited color palette and the Webtoon format. And just try, like, the Warning Label characters are a little Disney based, but because I got my teeth on like 80s comics, like initially I wanted to draw like George Perez, and I couldn't do that. But I had really grown up on Kurt Swan and Kurt Schaffenberger, and those guys were just solid. And oh my god, do I love Kurt Schaffenberger's work! But even Kurt Swan, like, his stuff is generally, like, these days it's boring, but it was so solid. Like, he never made a drawing mistake, and a lot of that got ingrained in me. But when I first started to tell my own stories, I was still telling the action event. It was a spy book because I didn't want to do superheroes, but I was still telling a more traditional comic book story. While I was doing that, I was working for one of the Village Voice papers, Cleveland Scene, where they wouldn't pay a lot, but they would need a lot of illustrations before Craigslist came and killed them because they couldn't have their advertising section anymore. So it would give me the opportunity to experiment with a lot of stuff, and I found I really like doing cartoony stuff and designy stuff. So when I did Love and Capes, I was looking at, I want to do something that's a little more fun. I want to do something that's in color. I want to do something that's a little simpler. And writing a comedy, it felt a little more natural to go into that. And along the same time, Batman the Animated Series had been out for a while. So suddenly you could tell more serious stories with more cartoony characters. And also, I'm a huge fan of Darwin Cook, obviously. He drew a cover for Love and Capes 3, which, wait. It hangs on my wall. So gave it to me.
That's great.
My favorite thing in the studio. But because of that, it opened my eyes to a new way of telling stories and art that 15-year-old Tom would never have thought worked. And now you start seeing is a valid opportunity. And the other thing that I found is that it was like I was always a cartoonier artist, It's just I didn't know it at the time. I kept fighting against it, and then all of a sudden, you start realizing you can hit the outside fastball, and then you start just pitching there. So I can still bust out more realistic stuff when I need to. I like dabbling in other styles, but my default is probably the Cupid's Arrows style right now. And there's always stuff you're doing to try to push it a little bit or challenge yourself a little bit, but that's where I'm comfortable. And I think I'm glad that I found it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I love how instantly recognizable your work is. And I always enjoy, this is one of my little secret things I like to do, because I like to celebrate my friends, as you all know. Sometimes when we're all at Baltimore, because Baltimore is like the family reunion show, right? Everybody's catching up.
Yeah, Mark Nathan calls it comic book Thanksgiving, and I think that's really, really accurate.
Comic book Thanksgiving, that's great. And I kind of walk around and kind of just sniff the air and see what's going on. And Tom has a really strong base in Baltimore. And I remember somebody was holding up some print that they bought from you, and they were just like sitting on the wall, like showing it off to their friends, and they were so excited. And I was like, yeah, that's Tom. Like I could see from across the room, that's one of Tom's things. And I think that means a lot, especially in the sea full of art, right? Like I can instantly recognize you did that. So good on you.
Thank you.
I had one other thing I was going to ask you about. Sure. Oh, Time and Vine. Can you talk about that? Because I think that's a brilliant project.
Thank you. Time and Vine came about because I saw a tweet from Kurt Busiek. At least I think this is how it happened. And he made a joke about, why doesn't anyone do a comic book about a winery? And the idea kind of exploded from there. I was like, it wasn't the project I was going to do next. I think my head was heading for something like Warning Label. And Time and Vine is about a magical time traveling winery where you can drink a bottle from 1912 and go back to 1912. And everything fell into place because from the moment of the story, I knew I wanted to be set in New York. I wanted it on the East Coast. And the oldest winery in the United States is in New York. The oldest continuously operating winery is Brotherhood in upstate New York. It's been around since before the Civil War. It survived Prohibition by making church wine. And it could make champagne because champagne was considered medicine. So you could get a prescription to make champagne. And you could still call it champagne back then too. So I have come to like wine a lot. I'm a member of like Stephen Amell's Wine Club, and like I just really like it. So I wanted to do a book that kind of fed into that. I got to do the research trips and go out to Brotherhood and take the tour and just get a sense of the history, and like all that stuff just clicked in place to the point that the ending that actually happens in Time and Vine, I don't want to spoil. The thing that happens to the male character was always planned. The female character's tie into it happened as I was writing it. And there's this point where you're writing it going, oh, what could the event be? And like all the timelines just converge, and you realize that like the answer was there all along. Like there was no other way that story could go. And yeah, that one was just really special. It was the first one. Like I didn't want to do a straight, like a typical will they or won't they, or how do they get together romance. It was very much about a past romance. And people at different stages in their life. And like, I like the idea of dealing with a lot of the history and trying to figure out different color palette. Like I hired Luigi Anderson to color it for me. Cause like my brain could not process how it was supposed to be colored. It's the only big project I've used that have had another, like I've used flatters before, like Mimi, but I haven't used like a straight out colorist before. And it was this magical thing. I think it's kind of like it's a really personal story, and I think that comes off. And it's one of those things that I have ideas about how to do a second one, but it has to be really like, I can't think I want to do it. I have to know I want to do it.
There's a nice comment here from Chris Bailey, who says, no one writes relationship dialogue better than you, Tom Zahler.
Thank you, Chris Bailey.
Tom Zahler.
I'm wearing a
t-shirt. Tom Zahler, this is your life. All right, Tom. Let's see some art, bro. Let's see some art.
How do I show it?
Go to the share thing, and then once you're set up. Yeah, once you get all that set up, I can bring it on screen.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, all right, screen share.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to give a little pause for the cause. Your favorite podcast, Clip Studio Paint, is brought to you by. Clip Studio Paint is sponsoring Pencil to Pencil. There you go. See, I got blinded because it went right across my eyes. I didn't know what I was saying. Which also there right now, thanks GRD, there is a 50% off discount going on with Clip Studio Paint. So you need to pick that up right now.
It must be like what, $10 or something? It must like be almost nothing.
I know it's a good deal. So get on that. All right, Tom, you ready?
Yeah.
No, you're not ready yet.
You came on the wrong page. I got it now. Here we go. Can you see it?
Yeah. All right. I'm bringing you one.
Okay.
All right. Cool, Tom. What are we looking at?
So this is the cover for Love and Capes 3. It's my homage to Frank Miller and Nick Cardy, because the Martha lettering at the bottom is very much the Aquaman lettering. As a letterer, I'm going to make lettering references. So I came back to Love and Capes this year. I did another 6-issue series called The Family Way that picks up 5 years after the characters have, after they had their first child. Now they have 2. Some of the stories some of the characters have changed. Some are very much the same. This is a story where because Mark, the Crusader's family, gets sick, he stops sleeping, so he goes crazy, which is something we always heard would happen with Superman. So the Batman character Darkblade has to take him down, and they're arguing about Washington and Jefferson because both their wives were named Martha, and Man of Steel is silly. So this one it's a promo piece for Cupid's Arrows. Like I said, it's the one about the Cupids who team up and have to get couples together. The conceit is they have to shoot both people in the relationship. This is one of those things that I designed it one so it would be like, as I was coming up with it, I wanted to figure out the look for it. The crossbows are not like, I found one that was like this, but they're not straight lines, which I think is interesting. I like that they're just wearing classy suits. I like that it's easier to cosplay, because I had a couple people who wanted to cosplay from Warning Label, but I didn't like, those characters are not necessarily distinctive enough. And this was very much designed to have something that people could graft onto. And yeah, I really like the show. It's this series. It's very much written like Nick and Nora, Thin Man. I wanted to write banter. I wanted to write a couple that was getting into all sorts of adventures. They travel around. It's been fun, but it chews up a lot of story because I keep getting different couples together. Here's some of My Little Pony stuff. All my stuff these days, I pencil digitally. I'll ink by hand, especially on the My Little Pony covers, because I want to have original artwork to sell, and I don't want to lose that skill. Like, I always want to be able to, like, I ink with a brush, and I don't want to ever lose that. I want to make sure I'm doing enough of that to keep going, and it's really convenient to work digitally, and it's just another tool, like we were talking about. Like, I don't feel like it's different from me working on paper, but it's I can zoom in and I can flip images really easy, and I'm really fast at it, but I don't want to lose the skill of actually drawing. I still do covers for the My Little Pony book. This one was about the first non-Pegasus pony to become a Wonderbolt, which is their flying team. So a couple of these are original characters, a lot of them are existing characters, and I don't know, it's just cool to play around with a lot of the coloring to get that really like light shaded effect. And also I started experimenting with, I got a set of brushes called Grut brushes, Grut. So
I see those on my Facebook wall all the time.
Yeah, that's where I found them, and they're amazing. There are way too many of them, but I used to be able to get really good painter effects in the program Painter, of all things, but it always felt really slow, and like it was the worst way to do anything. So when the Grut brushes are in Photoshop, and makes it really easy to get these kind of like chalky painterly effects with the shadows. And the other one I'll show you is this one, which apparently I have to zoom in on. This was the cover for one particular issue of My Little Pony where Pinkie Pie accidentally takes over Discord, who's kind of like Q from Star Trek, takes over his dimension. But the story was actually pitched, and it's called A Pinkless Now. So that's actually the Bob Peak cover to Apocalypse Now, because Pinkie Pie essentially goes native, and the other ponies have to go upriver to get her. I even put him in a boat. If you look closely, Rarity, the unicorn with the purple hair, is wearing fatigues, because in my head, she's the Robert Duvall character. Yeah, it's very much set up to, while still being My Little Pony looking thing, it's that Bob Peak Marlon Brando cover.
That's great.
That's what I got.
Oh, I thought you had.
Because
I thought you had some more.
Oh yeah, they just had one other Love and Capes cover. So that was the first big image I did after coming back. That was the cover to the first issue, and because I had the issues come out at comic book conventions, this one released at New York Comic Con, so I made sure to make a New York cover.
You got some fans in the room. Hey, Tom, can you let's talk about tech real quick, and then maybe we'll wrap up, because I don't want to take up all of your evening. One thing that we seem to be avoiding lately is we don't really ask people about their setups. And one thing I know that you're kind of a tech head, right? We talk about tech a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But there's something that's hiding behind your screen there that maybe you could talk. Talk about.
How do I bring it back up? Like, do I have to unshare my screen, or is that you?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll take it out.
Okay. So this.
Hold on. Let me give you the. There you go.
Okay. This is a Razer Nostromo. Sorry, it's that thing where I'm looking at stuff. So I have my hand on this, and there's a bunch of hotkeys, and there's a directional D-pad and a scroll wheel and another button. It's built for gamers, but what I do is these are all mapped to Photoshop keys, and I also did it for Clip Studio. So, like, I can rotate the image on Clip Studio without taking my hand off the page. I can switch brushes. I can, in Photoshop, I can, use the Magic Wand tool. I've got it set up to macros. So there are times where in Photoshop you select an area, but what you want to do is increase that selection by 2 pixels so you don't get that little anti-aliasing thing that happens. Yeah. So one of the keys is that. So I can go through and color really fast and merge layers. A friend of mine, Brad Coghill, told me about it, and then I got one for Christmas, and ever since I've started using it, it is amazing how much a part of my world that is. So I work on a Cintiq that's hooked up to my Mac. I've got a big scanner and 11x17 printer for when I want to work in real space. But yeah, that, and the Nostromo is not supported in the new version of the Mac operating system, so I really have to figure out what I'm going to do, because right now, especially, I've got another 6 episodes of Cupid's Arrows I have to do, and I'm churning out like 6 pages a week doing it, and I can't imagine doing that many pages without having that. Like, if it would just add another layer of complexity to what I'm doing, and I just like the part where it's just saving so much time not having to take my hand off the screen.
So you have like your rhythm down, right? You have your process, your rhythm down. Yeah. So would you have to buy? Did they make a new one, or that's?
So Razer has said they're not supporting new systems. So I will have to eventually I'll have to find a driver that will duplicate it. And I don't know that anything will ever be as streamlined as this one is, because it's the way it's set up. It'll know what program you're in. And this one is they call it the chroma. So you can do different colors. So when it's blue, we're running Photoshop. When it's orange, it's running Clip Studio. Which is, it's a nice visual that I can tell like that I'm in the right program, because the keys are a little bit different. I set them up so they were as similar as possible. So like when I'm doing the brush command, that's always the same key, but Clip Studio has that really cool rotate feature, which I wish every program had. So I have keys set up to that, so I can just spin my drawing around like it was on my table. That's not available in Photoshop. So those keys do other stuff in Photoshop. So eventually I'll have to find a new driver, but for right now I'm just holding off, and I'm not I'm not upgrading. There's nothing. I don't need to be the first one to try out a new thing. You know, if you don't want to upgrade to that version of Photoshop that complicates your life in a whole new way, like let pioneers take the arrows. Other people can try that stuff out. I need stuff that, you know, it's a production machine. It doesn't get to go out of service. I run the new stuff on my laptop because I can live without it, but this machine has to run all the time. Like I can't be experimenting too much.
You don't download a new operating system while you're on deadline.
Nope.
No.
Suddenly, all your programs don't work anymore.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I see all the time somebody's in a forum somewhere going, "Oh my God, I'm in the middle of a project and I just upgraded to like highfalutin Sierra and everything doesn't work anymore." Like, you know, come on, man, you got to wait to the weekend for that. Don't do that on deadline. I was going to, you know what? JRD had another writing question for you, but there's so much chatter in the chat room, it's gone. So, but I can reiterate. J. Robert Deans wanted to know, Tom, if you have like a wish list of stories you'd like to write, or couples you'd like to write for, or relationship projects you'd like to do.
I think I saw his question, and he wanted to know if I wanted to write Moonlighting, the characters in Moonlighting, Ethan Hunt and Ilsa from Mission Impossible, or Nick from The Thin Man.
Yes,
because I love the Mission Impossible films, and I think part of the reason I love them is Brad Bird did one of them, and part of the reason I love them is that I think I don't want to participate in Mission Impossible, with the caveat that if they want me to, I will totally do it. But I'm not chasing it down, because it's nice to have one fandom that you're a fan of and you don't want to be part of. Like I've gotten to write Star Trek, that's fantastic. But when you do that, like you step behind the curtain a little bit, and it's nice to have one thing that's just pure entertainment. Even though like I can't watch something and not break the story down and like see the things put in and like, oh, that line will be important later. But I still like, I can enjoy those on a level that's different for things that I really want to do. I really want to write The Thin Man. I think if you got the right cast, it would work great. I think there are lots of things you could do with it. I just think those movies are so charming, and those actors, like, it survived a lot on the quality of the actors. And I think there are so many good casting agents. Like, it always strikes me that, like a lot of the shows that used to be on USA Network, and they just had magic. They could pick any the two actors they would pick to be buddies would be electric. And if you got that kind of chemistry between two characters, you could do The Thin Man up and down. Past that, I would love to write Superman. I would love to write Captain Marvel, Shazam. I think he's a Pixar character in a DC comic. I think he should be in his own universe, because he needs to be in a universe where he can have a tiger walking in a suit and people go, "Hey, that's Mr. Takitani," and not, "Oh my God, what was that?" which is the natural reaction. And I think it's got just a sense of whimsy to it, where, you know, it knows when to take itself lightly. There's lots of stuff I'd like to do, and you know, there are opportunities that, you know, like My Little Pony. There was no part of Tom Zahler being at the Cupid school where he said, "You know what, a good chunk of my income is going to come from writing pastel ponies. That's what I'm going to do." But it's been a joy to be part of. So, like, I like figuring out how to tell a story. I can't say what. I'll tell you guys off the air. But I got offered the chance to pitch on something for San Diego that didn't happen for a lot of reasons, including the lack of San Diego. But it was this weird, you know how like you'll get those Green Lantern Star Trek crossovers that you go, that's just silly. There was one of those that was so crazy, and like, I'm in. Like, this makes no sense. I want to do this so much. So it's just fun taking a concept like that and figuring out how to make it work. Like, I like the challenge. I like the architecture of it.
One of my favorite things about you, Tom, and back when you used to be our Kramer on my old Comic Book Diner podcast with John and Rich, it was always like Tom just like burst through the door like, "Yo, what's up?" It's like, "Tom Zahler." I would always joke with you, Tom, that I said Tom is brilliant, and as long as I've known you, it's probably been 20 years. I've never heard Tom go, "I don't know."
No, that happens a lot, but
I don't know. But one of the things I really enjoy about Tom is that he kind of dots all of his I's and crosses his T's. If you ever go into a convention or tabled for a long time, you'll see a bunch of creators who are like barely there. Like they're there, they don't have a tablecloth. Their wallets covered under a bunch of old French fry boats. They're just a mess.
Well,
But
why did you have
Tom,
to say that? Why did you have to say that, Jamar?
sorry, Mike. But Tom always has a spreadsheet. He knows exactly what's sold. He knows exactly what not to bring next time because that thing didn't sell. So maybe he should do this. It's like boom, 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 boom. And I don't know a lot of people that have that level of just like keeping everything moving at the same time that Tom does. So I really appreciate that about you, Tom. It's made me a better business person being friends with you.
I don't like having the same problem twice. I like having a completely different crisis each time. So like it's solving for your last problem so you can worry about your next one. When I started doing conventions, this is super stupid, but there was a point where I realized I could afford 2 toothbrushes. And so like I could just have a bag of stuff that I could take with shows and I didn't have to remember to bring my toothbrush ever again. Like there was a second toothbrush and like a second razor that just lived there. But I never had to worry about that again.
That's hilarious.
So, like that problem is solved. We'll figure out what happens. Something else will go wrong next time. It's nice not to worry about that one too.
Oh, and also I almost forgot that Tom was creating new shelving systems for his convention table.
I did that for a while, yeah.
Like you had kind of like did this. I don't know. You had a CAD instructions or SketchUp or something. You're like, hey, check this out. I was like, you built this?
Built it. Yeah. I was super bored at a convention one time. Like nobody was there, but someone had this little piece of cardboard that folded down to be like an easel, and I'm like, oh, there should be a way to do that. And I had the time to like build a prototype while I was there, because like I would take that big, the metal grid type racks. I would take those out to San Diego, but it would cost so much to ship it. Like I would have to sell 5 trades to make up for what it was costing that thing to go out there. Where if I could figure out how to build a piece of foam core that would fit in my suitcase, and I could leave behind if I needed to, it didn't add any weight, and then I had a way to display my books, and I did that for a while. I've gotten into the David Peterson turned me on to like the wooden shelves that a lot of people use. Like those are a little more sturdy and like that has become what I do now. But for a long time, those foam core racks were, it solved that problem for me. Like I didn't have to worry about how to ship a display out. I figured out how to make one that was cheap that, I would love to figure out a way to like mass produce those. Like people would offer, they're like, oh, will you make one for me? I'm like, they cost a lot of money. Because it's one big piece of foam core, which isn't expensive, but it's like an hour of me cutting and a lot of measuring. And like, I'll do that for me, but if I'm going to do that for somebody else, there's going to have to be a paycheck.
I think Tom is going to be the first cartoonist on Shark Tank.
Oh, sharks!
I love it. All right, well, Mike, do you have anything left for Tom before we check out here?
I just wondered if you had any more online stuff planned. Any more? You've got your next after this story. If you've got some more ideas lined up.
So I'm talking with Webtoon about season 3 right now for Cupid's Arrows. Like I said, Cupid's Arrows is designed to keep going. There's also, when I was pitching them Cupid's Arrows, there was another thing I was working on that is a shorter story, and they were interested in that. So that's always a possibility, or if there's another place to put it. There's one person I know who's really interested in it, and if they ever get the opportunity, like I've given them right of first refusal. Those are the 2 things I have going right now. I mean, Love and Capes was designed on that 2x4 grid, and every 4th panel is a joke. So that's always designed to be able to be turned back into a comic strip if I need it to. But for right now, like there's more stuff I want to do, but I don't have anything immediately ready for online. Part of me wants to do another print book, or like even Comixology. They're what is it? The Comixology Select. Their creator owned one. Like I don't think that's a bad way to go. If it doesn't cost you a lot of money to put a piece there, you might as well do it. Like I did 24-hour comic book day once.
Once.
And I really like doing it. And again, I would do it again if somebody paid me, because the first time you do it for the challenge, and like I was set up at a mall, and we had a big display, and I was working on Cintiq, and I got a loaner Cintiq. It was before I had mine, and we did it live, and there's a little countdown clock. And I think when you do something like that, it forces you to make different choices and really assess why you're doing things and find new ways. Like it's a learning process as well as being a stunt. But I took that story, because that was never printed, and I put that up on Comixology, and I still see a little bit of money every now and then for it. And I've got that online on my store too, just because there's no reason not to. Like, it's so easy to sell digital stuff these days, and so many people have iPads that are capable of doing something far more like a comic book format. Like I think I probably stick around that 6x9 manga format. I think that really lends itself to tablet screens, and it's a little cheaper to get printed. You can get more pages for it, because that's why we did long distance in the 6x9 manga format. So yeah, I'm not short of ideas to do. I'm just short of people to pay me to do them.
Well, one thing that you are not, Tom Zahler, is short.
That's true. Right.
True. Drank a lot of milk.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go, Tom. Thank you so much for being on.
Sure.
I hope that you would like to grace us with your presence in the near future. And I think it was great that our fan base and some of our new people were able to meet you tonight. So, Tom, where can people find you online?
I am at Tom Zahler, THOMZAHLER. H in my name because that's how my mom spelled it. On Instagram and Twitter, and Tom Zahler Cartooning on Facebook. I don't post a ton because I hate people and social media. I just get burnt out on it. It's such a cesspool that I'll come on and say, "Here's Cupid's arrows, got to go, bye." But I respond to stuff that's on there. Like I see all the comments. I respond to most of those. Yeah, and I'm always putting up some art. I like it just being a channel for like the creative aspect. So, but yeah, that's where I am.
Oh, very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. And
yeah,
good luck to everything with you over there in the studio. And if I know you, you'll always have work.
Thanks. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Oh yeah, you as well. All right. Have a good night, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, that Tom Zahler. I love him to pieces. All right, now I'm kicking him out. Bye. Yeah, guys, it was great being able to catch up with Tom. Tom's a great friend, and I'm glad that we have such a diverse group of cartoonists and writers and other creatives in our mix, Mike. I think we all learn from each other in different ways, and even
we've all helped each other out on various projects and things like that. We're like brotherhood.
Yeah, and it's a real thing too, and it may not be a thing where everybody's like hanging out playing cricket or high lie or something like that.
We play cricket.
Man, it's just maybe 2 more books and I can get a golf cart. That's what I'm hoping for. But yeah, like just having like the network is really important. And even if we just like don't see each other all the time or talk to each other all the time, everybody knows we're always there.
Networking is a very, very important thing to do, to maintain. Because I'm always saying, so you work with somebody here today, who knows where they'll be 10 years from now. And comics is still a small enough family that everybody kind of gets to know and work with somebody that you worked with, and I think it pays dividends back in unexpected ways that you can't necessarily predict in 10 years what will happen with somebody that you work with. Just like if you burn bridges and you burn people, they'll be like still 10 years from now going like, when your name comes up, they're like, no, not that person, not that person.
Yeah.
And we all know people that are like that.
Yeah, that's real. And as you know, as small as the comic book pool is, like it's so important to just, I mean, what do they say? Don't be a dick or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the quote.
Yeah,
Yeah, you look up in Webster's quote book, it's like, don't be a dick. Yeah, I think that's on every page.
And I don't think it has to be self-serving or anything, or like you don't have to like kiss butt, but it's kind of like just be decent. I know a lot of kind of like behind the scenes stuff is like, especially at big comic book conventions. And this has happened to me like younger parts of my career where I had to learn how to be a little more humble and just kind of like take things as they came. Is people show up at your table and you don't know who they are. Right. Everybody might have badges, but a lot of the times now, Mike, people don't even have their names on badges. It might just be, or they turned it around, or they'll tuck it in their shirt. Like especially
have it up backwards or something,
Especially in places like New York or like San Diego, because there's like all types of people crawling around in there. Like you may be, like we're talking about with Tom, like in the middle of feeling like I really need a taco, and somebody shows up at your table and they're like thumbing through stuff and asking you questions that are probably annoying you. The next thing you know, this person gives you a card. They're from Netflix, you know what I mean, or they're from Nickelodeon, and they don't announce that. It's almost like it's like a sniff test. Like, what kind of person am I dealing with when you don't know who I am? So that's not more about being a dick or not, but just being prepared. It's like what I wanted.
Just be a nice person, and kind of weird kind of weird some people out. You see some people, their egos blow up and they get weirded out because maybe they're nervous, or some people just have like poor social skills, because there's a lot of artists that are like that, or they're not good in a social situation.
And you touched on that. Just, if you kind of consider that most cartoonists spend maybe, 10 months out of their year hunched over a table by themselves in a radio. And then the next 2 months, you're like traveling to places and having people in your face. That can be a bit of a culture shock. Not everybody's set up to be like, hello, and turning that switch. So, just being aware of it. And I've even said to younger creators, if you feel like this is something you can't do, bring somebody to help you. There's nothing wrong with having people at your table that, if maybe you're like hunched over drawing and can't make eye contact with
people. Honey, sign the book.
Take the money. Whatever that is that you seem to have problems with, you can solve that if you just put some time on it.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I see that very often. You'll see the artist will have the husband or the wife will sort of manage the booth, and then they can sign or talk or buy stuff or bag stuff or whatever, kind of get your wrap down, your booth game down. I mean, I think it's going to be very different when we go back. I think it might be, who knows, it might be several years before we go back at the way things are going, but I think it's going to be different. And I think that the online thing, like what we're doing, is going to be a bigger presence. So and when we're going to go back, I think everybody's going to probably want to be extra nice, Oh, I'm so glad to see you. Don't touch me.
Don't touch me. Everybody's going to have your shower.
Here's my book.
When you put your book in those scientist gloves that are inside the wall,
right? Radioactive gloves, hand you my book,
Can I sign that for you? Here you go. You take your hands out of the glove. But yeah, so yeah, Tom's always great, and he's a font of knowledge. He knows a lot, and he's a really smart business person. And just like you see how diverse his career has gone for the past 10, 15 years, it's just a testament to him being able to do whatever the job is. And I think that's
that's important, because I think that probably more than ever, we have to be diverse.
Mhm.
because it's, like I always say, Al Williamson worked for 40 years, 50 years doing the same thing.
Mhm.
I don't know any artist is going to do one thing for 50 years now, or even 10,
Yeah.
even if you're trying to do this job. 10 years ago, I wasn't using a digital tablet and stuff like that. Who knows? 10 years from now, nobody may be using Clip Studio Paint. Nobody may use Photoshop. There may be some whole other. We might not even have any wires 10 years from now.
Right. Right.
So who knows with these formats of delivery? So I think you have to be aware of that. I think our generation, because of where we were placed age-wise, still got the what they call the like the old version of audio, right? We still had now everything's digital, right? And so we started out in that old version, and now we're adapting. I mean, I've adapted how many times since the mid 90s?
Yeah.
Right, from faxes to faxes to email. And now email's not fast enough. Now we got texting and instant messaging. So I just think as an artist, especially a commercial artist, you're always going to have to adapt, even if you don't want to. If you can work commercially, you used to use Quark. You used to use. There's so many programs. So I just think it's always impressive to see people like Tom who keep dancing to the next, seeing it coming, being aware of it, being prepared for it, embracing the change, and then find how you can take that and make it work for what you want, so that you're not like a victim of it.
Yeah, I wonder now, maybe like say Tom and maybe the generation that we're in right now, or my age, or maybe a little more flexible than maybe the guys from your generation, because you're an outlier in that way, Mike. Because you're a forecaster and you see how things might be up the road, and you kind of start putting your acorns away just in case. Yeah. And like, there's a lot of guys we know who just never transitioned, or they were like, computer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know where they are now, and it's kind of sad. But it's like you have to
Instagram.
You have to reinvent.
Like yeah, there's still people. A lot of guys are like, no, I don't want to go on Instagram. I don't want to go on Twitter. I don't want to. And I think that if your job is to get your work in front of people, then I'm not a big fan of Twitter personally. I think I don't. But I use it because it's a channel that people turn on every day, so to speak. So
yeah, it's real. Yeah.
I mean, I think you use Twitter probably a little bit more than I do, but that might be because of where your particular fan base or audience is.
Yeah. I don't tweet enough to be like Twitter exclusive. Like, some people are just like burning the keyboard up all day long, and I can't keep up.
Yeah, they're constantly like, all day you see their name would just constantly go by. Like if somebody says something, they're right on there. I guess CompuServe used to be like that or whatever back in the old day. Dudes would be blowing up, thousands.
IRC.
Yeah.
IRC chats. Yeah, I remember all that stuff. All right, well, let's start wrapping it up. I wanted to ask you what you thought of our interview with Rico last Saturday.
I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really cool. And again, we're trying to bring people can letter, color, do different kinds of cartooning, do different kinds of drawing. Because, I mean, that's the thing about comics, animation, illustration. There's a place for you, right? It's not, some people find more than one place. And I'm just interested in a lot of different kinds of art and always have been. So that was really cool to talk to him about and seeing that particular way of coloring, which he talked about, which was not the standard, standard way that most comics are colored, or the philosophy behind it. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, that's very cool. And just as a really interesting guest sandwich. I want to give a preview for our Saturday guests. We're going to have acclaimed graphic novelist and cartoonist and editor Kazu Kibuishi is going to be here. Kazu is a really, really amazing cartoonist. He might be more famously known for his series Amulet at Scholastic that he's been doing for maybe 10 years, something like that.
Wow.
He's been doing Amulet for a while. It's a great bestseller. And Kazu's an amazing talent. He also was the editor on the Flight anthology for Image for a long time. And also one of my favorite comics he did, Daisy Cutter. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It was brilliant. And I also use that in a lot of my comic book illustration classes as an example of clear storytelling. So this guy's a master of his craft. I'm really excited. And also, here's a little tip. Not a tip. There's a little sound bite. Kazu was the first person to buy Leon when it debuted.
Really? He was the first sale?
It was my first sale. You know, he was a sweetheart.
Mom didn't get first?
Yeah, man. So, I'm really excited to talk to Kazu on Saturday. We have a bunch of other guys lined up. We have some question marks, so I don't really want to talk about them too much. But I'll give you a
we have people who say yes, but we're trying to figure out like when to bring in each person. We might have even switch a couple days that we podcast to accommodate people's schedules. So, but yeah, a lot of really, really, really cool people are in the wings.
Yeah, and I don't want to give away too many things, but I think that'll give you some options for hanging out with us. Also, let me give another plug for YouTube. If you haven't signed up for our YouTube channel, please do. Please go to it. We don't have a URL yet. That comes later. We need to get more subscribers. But if you just go to YouTube and type in pencil
We're a
to
third
pencil,
of the way there now, right? We need 100, right?
Yeah, I think we need 100
if
subscribers.
you're listening to this and you haven't, go now. I'm going to be like Patrick Stoner from WHOY. If you're listening now, please go to Pencil to Pencil on YouTube and
I love it.
subscribe. Every subscription counts. We will be happy to send you a no prize for your subscription.
No, we call it. What do we call it? A Naw prize or a John? A no John.
No John. You'll get a special Philadelphia no John for subscribing.
Oh man, that's awesome! I got to make those. So Mike, can you kind of explain? Because I know we kind of just dropped the YouTube on people. Some people who are already liking our Facebook page might go, "Why do I need to sign up? Let's like you guys on YouTube. What's the point?"
Well, the point is that you need to have enough subscriber on YouTube so that you're basically legitimate. You know, you're not just somebody who's going to put up like you said, like a video of some Fight Club or somebody getting their head cut off or some horrible stunt or something like that. So you get vetted. They're vetting people now. So it should be pretty easy with the amount of people that listen to us to go and subscribe. Also, you can look up Mike Manley on Patreon. And if you like the show, you can go and contribute some dollars towards our Patreon. Again, every little bit, everything counts. A subscription counts. If you can chip us a couple bucks, that counts. I think that what we're really trying to do is to not only do an entertaining podcast, but actually give people who are interested in doing this as a profession information that will make that easier and better and more possible.
That was very succinct, Mike. Thank you. One last drop, and then we're gonna pull the anchor. Do you want to give an update on tomorrow's, or maybe do another call to action for John?
Well, just like last week, all the small publishers are suffering, as you heard Tom talking about with IDW and everything. So in the case of John, who has given a lot back, I think, to fandom about the history of the medium, They're always having specials. There's different specials to go and pick bundles, digital bundles, print bundles. So if you go to tomorrows.com, even if you just, buy 1 or 2 books, digital editions, the cheapest version, all that goes to help John, goes back to help him and people like me and the other editors that put out the great magazines like Michael Urey and Roy Thomas and John Cook. And it really helps a small publisher like John, who is really getting socked because he doesn't have Disney dollars behind him. So it really, the smaller you are, the more one person going and saying, "Hey, I appreciate what you did. Here's $5, whatever." That really counts. Really counts towards the bottom line.
Yeah. It's all going to help, and we really can't let John turn these lights out because he is a touchstone to the history of comics, and if we're going to keep us being living historians up, we need resources like John and Tomorrow's Publishing. Yeah. So please do what you can.
You don't want people to say, "Oh yeah, I was going to go over there and I was going to help. Oh, he went out of business. That person went out of business. Oh man, that was my favorite restaurant. Oh, when did you eat there? Well, I never ate there, but like 5 years ago. But so again, I know it's really easy. All our lives are very busy. But the great thing about digital is you can go right now after this podcast is over, go right over to tomorrows.com and buy something.
JRD says, will digital purchases help as much?
Yes, they will. Yes, it will. Mainly because one of the costs for us as a small publisher is to warehouse back issues and then ship them. So that's all money you have to pay to store books. You have to pay money to ship books. And in this case, John's doing a lot of shipping himself, but you got to have a warehouse that has the old books.
And Roger says he's got articles that need to get published. You need to make sure God stays flush.
Another reason. Again, any one, even one. If you can only buy one, just buy one. It all adds up.
And also for all you people who said that you are fans of Draw Magazine, and I heard this a lot, Mike, and this isn't dirty laundry. Like, I'll say, well, yeah, I'm the crusty critic for Draw Magazine. I write columns. Oh, they still make those? Like, yes. And I would always give them the URL to the website. Go get a subscription. Go pick up some back issues. And I think almost all of them are still on the.
I think all the digital editions. There are some that are in print that are out of print now, because the other thing is that most comic book stores do not carry Tomorrow's products. Right? There's a
whole other problem.
Right. So there's a handful of stores. There are colleges that carry Draw.
That's true.
There's a lot of comic book stores that do not carry it. So for the prospective young cartoonist that's going in, they're never going to see it. So that's why, again, it's even more important. You have the opportunity to go. And again, hey, maybe you don't want to have, 30 issues in a box in your studio. Maybe you'd rather have it on your iPad or on your laptop. Fine. Because of the way the industry is structured. And it's pretty shaky right now. It's more important to go and do that.
Yeah, that's great. And you know what? We got some dedicated people in the room. I love all of you guys for helping support us, because the stuff doesn't happen on its own, and we have to make sure we can hold each other up. So that's awesome. Thank you guys so much. All right, I'm going to click that off. All right, you guys, this was a really great episode. Thanks again to Thom Zahler for hanging out with us in his studio. As always, we are going live at 8 p.m. on Wednesdays and Saturdays during the pandemic. Coming up towards the end of the month, we may fluctuate. Like Mike said, we have a couple of guests that we may have to kind of shoehorn into the week. So we'll let you know ahead of time if we're diverting from our regular schedule.
And you can
but
always watch us here,
Mhm.
and you can always watch us on YouTube.
Oh, last thing. I keep finding out, Mike, that people get really upset when they miss the live, and I think they disintegrate after that. All of these are archived. Every one of these videos is archived. If you go to our Facebook page, just click on the videos. They're all there. There's probably 70 hours of content right there. So easy. So, catch the wave, you guys. There's a lot there for you to digest.
Can't sleep, get up, put on a podcast.
Right. P2P.
Yeah, here you go.
All right, you guys. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you all. We're gonna sign out. Good night. I'm Jamar Nicholas. See you Saturday. For my buddy Mike Manley, I'm Jamar. We'll see you on Saturday. And remember, wash your hands. Good night.